Yeah, g'day folks, just Benno here. Just again, just want to really what I want to do is complete our little series, I guess, on specific growth rate and what we use it for, just by summarising some of the key factors in what SGR is, what we use it for, so on and so forth. So realistically, I think our last session you should have gone through and been able to recreate what I've got here, and by the end of the second sheet, you should have realised that, holy moly, there's a whole lot of numbers in between each other before we get to our final harvest stage down here on the 24th of the 3rd, 2020. So realistically, if we'd been off and we'd researched this information, it's not information we've pulled off the farm, we can use this as a predictive tool as to find out when we need to switch over food. So when we're running out our 2 meal diet, we know that we need 10 days of it, and it starts from the 1st to the 2nd to the 11th of the 2nd, and that's all we need in terms of the time frame. I guess the volume is going to be dependent on how many fish we have at that stage at that time, which we'll talk about later on. And then at that point in time, by the 11th of the 2nd, we need to have our 4 mil on our doorstep, and then by the 28th of the 3rd, we need to have our 6 mil on our doorstep. So what this tool becomes is a predictive tool that we can give to our feed suppliers to say, hey, these are when we need to get food to our doorstep or to our farm to ensure that we don't start to compromise any growth on the fish, and to make sure that our program is running fully out to the other end. The other side of the coin with this specific growth rate calculation, and bearing in mind we've just done this as a very basic one for now, it doesn't take into account temperature. As we know, the fish, or the growth of the fish, is very dependent on temperature, and specific growth rates for a given size of fish will vary within their optimal range. So at 24 degrees, 100 gram fish will grow slower than the same size of fish at 26, 27, 28 degrees, so on and so forth. So we start to talk about using specific growth rate models in a bigger context later on, where we can pull a model together, and normally it's something from a research document that we embed into a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet or into another application or a program that's already purchased off a professional business that does that for a job. And we can embed those specific growth rate calculations into the programs or into our spreadsheets to predict when our fish are going to hit these stages of growth, or you might call them growth phases. So realistically, we can look at this data from here, and we can go from the 1st to the 2nd, 2018, how long is our harvest going to be? So we can scroll down, we've got our target weight, we know that the market really wants to accept, say, 3 kilo fish, for instance. We can come down and we can say that with a certain amount of reliability, assuming that we're feeding our fish well and that there's no disease problems or anything related to poor weather events, so on and so forth, that might hold back our production process, we can reliably predict that by the 24th of the 3rd, 2020, this particular farm is going to have fish at harvest size. So that's what this model is really about, is to be able to provide information back to our feed suppliers about when we need our food. It's also about setting a framework up for us to be able to monitor the stages of development, and also predict when our fish are going to hit market size down here. Alright, the other side of the coin is, we started off kind of a roundabout way in the earlier sessions, was that we can use this sort of arrangement here as a monitoring tool. So we know that the researched information tells us all this information over here, but over here we can simplify it just by saying, hey, we should be achieving this specific growth rate within this calculation, and we might call that a target. So we might go target growth or benchmark growth or whatever it might be, and it might be a KPI or key performance indicator, and we might just go actual. Alright, so then what might happen is, if I just fill this down, hopefully it's not going to have a meltdown, which it just did. We can, from there, we can go, well, the actual is, give me 2 seconds. Sorry about that, I just needed to make some quick amendments without boring you to tears. So we can set our targets. We know that that's what we can achieve, and over time that target may change. We might find in 5 years' time that the target's 10% better or 15% worse, who knows, but we can modify those targets. And then the actual might just be something like, we started at 50 grams, and in that 10-day period, our fish only grew to 56 grams. All right, and then we can see that the target is 1.8. We can see that the actual in that period of time is actually lower than what it should be. Then we can go back and have a look at that growth curve or whatever it might be, look at the feeding results, speak to our clients, speak to our feeders on the water, speak to our supervisors, and find out why we weren't able to achieve that. And then we might come across to this one over here, and we might say, right, I started at 100 grams and ended at 270 grams in that period, and we can say, well, what happened here? The actual's up higher than what it should be. What did we do in that phase that made it improve? So we can use this template more as a rolling month by month analysis or weight check by weight check analysis. It might be periodically two times a year. Who knows how you want to set it up? And realistically, we would, set it up, do it again. We might set up a bunch of charts versus. So we might come through here and go target versus actual, insert a chart. I think this might work. Alright, so just something simple like that. Oops, daisy, sorry. Just overlaid on there. So, and that might go into a report. So we can look at the target versus the actuals. Leave that set up on a month by month basis. Leave it where it is. Just copy and paste the sheet so we can just left click and drag, drop it. So we might rename this one here to May and then this one to June, for instance. Okay, so as a monitoring tool, we might just come through here and make a bunch of bum figures so that we're 520, 995, 1620, 2950. Alright. And hopefully we would have seen that that curve has changed ever so slightly, which really quickly represents to us that there is some sort of deviation away from our target. So really it was just about, this session was just about refining that we've got a predictive tool that we can also we can use to predict the amount of food, where and when, but also to predict when our harvest appears or when our harvesting schedules might be arranged against this SGR model. And then as a management tool or a monitoring tool more so to speak, that we can look at our trends over time against our target SGRs or our growth, whatever you want to call it, to make some formal management decisions. Alright, so hopefully from here you can recreate some of these things within your practical assessments. So over time we might ask things about the growth of your animal. Hopefully you can go through and use some of these tools to present charts like this to put into your reports. So from here we'll move across into, I think we're going to start working on feeding efficiencies and things like that. But I'm hoping that this stuff sinks in. If it doesn't sink in, just give me a holler and we'll talk you through it. Alright, see you.